Okay, we're going to do a test of running a code lab in Antigravity. We have done some preparation here. In particular, we've asked Antigravity itself to come up with a rule to follow to make sure that it doesn't go off the rails or sort of keep it from going off the rails, keep it from overachieving, taking superhuman effort. We want it to test the code lab the same way that a human would test a code lab. We've also gone into the browser. So we've got it to open up its own browser. We've gone into this browser and I've logged on with my own ID and I've created a fresh new project there. So that's all teed up. And that is part of the prompt that we have defined for anti-gravity to go through. So we're trying to learn everything, trying to apply all the lessons we've learned with the testing we've done so far of code labs. This is a non-trivial code lab, so we should learn something by seeing how well it is able to get through this code lab. And this will be an actual test of a way that a customer would go through it because this is on an external system with a brand new, fresh project. So here we've teed this up. We have confirmed with anti-gravity that it is using the rule that we specified. So this is the rule that anti-gravity came up with for all of the actions that it should take, things it should avoid. So it's interesting. Just kind of gave it an English description of what I wanted it to do. And it came back with seems to be a pretty decent set of guidelines for it to follow. So we'll see how that goes. And now I'm going to submit the prompt. And here it's opened up the browser. Now it's asking for my input. So we're going to go back here. Yeah, that looks good. One of the things that I need to prepare is actions that can be skipped. So I'm not, for things that are pretty well standard or don't really require input, giving it a general okay. So lesson learned there to make this as efficient as possible. I know that there is a way to specify standard responses for things that you're okay with it going ahead and doing. Be good to get it to have some way to show which step it's on, kind of really be focused on the human progress through a code lab. So that's super clear and highlighting what it can do, what it can't do for each of the steps. It's enabling the APIs that are required. Okay, took a little while and there were a few bumps in the road, but the net is anti-gravity worked through the entire code lab and got to the expected result. So I've recorded some lessons learned here, but first let's go over to the browser and check out confirmation that what we expected to happen happened. So here is the deployment that got created automatically by running through the code lab. The key thing is in this, let's take a look at the code lab again. So one of the things we want to confirm is that the actual end of the code lab is what we expected. And going back to the code lab in step 8, there are steps to validate that everything works. This involves starting up Gemini CLI in the Cloud Shell, checking to see what MCP servers are available, and then most importantly, this prompt, where can I find penguins? And what we want to get back is a response that we know is coming through the MCP server. So not a general kind of response about the location of penguins, but something that's specific to what the MCP server is going to respond with. So let's go over to here. We've started up the Gemini within Cloud Shell. Notice that the font choice here looks like it's really designed for dark mode or in light mode. Here we see Zoo Remote, which is the MCP server that was automatically created by Antigravity running through the code lab. And what is that prompt again? So we see that it's there. Let's go back and want to get, where can I find penguins? Paste that here, allow it, and we get the response. You see here the response is what we would expect to get going back to the code lab. And this confirms that anti-gravity was able to go through the steps in the code lab and get to the expected outcome. Now, the path was not entirely without bumps. And one of the things done here is to go through the lessons learned. One of the important things is that by default, anti-gravity tried to go through the commands in the local environment, and the code lab actually is intended to work in Cloud Shell. So we needed to give it some additional prompting to say go through Cloud Shell rather than the local system. The other thing is that there were a number of cases where I needed to manually accept the commands, and doing this on a repeated basis would probably be kind of tiresome. I do think it's important for the first time through a code lab like this to watch it manually to see what succeeds and where it fails. And there were, in fact, some places where there are opportunities to improve the code lab, make it easier for a human to go through it. But we wouldn't catch that if all of the prompts had been automatically accepted. So there are a couple of settings within anti-gravity that allow us to either accept actions or allow list specific actions. Another thing that's worth looking at is automating the last mile, the last kilometer. So you saw I went through the process there of manually starting up Gemini CLI in Cloud Shell and checking to ensure that the MCP server worked as expected. Ideally, we'd like anti-gravity to do that. Need to do some thinking about how to automate that step. And you see here, so there's actually a good summary here on the right about what worked and some things to point out. In fact, there's a section here about the URL for the deployment in Cloud Run. The specification of it is a little bit hard coded in the code lab, and it's interesting that Antigravity noticed that, made a recommendation. But down here, the final conclusion is that the environment is fully set up, and you can verify this by running Gemini and Cloud Shell. Well, ultimately, it would be nice if anti-gravity could validate that. Not sure exactly how to specify that, but overall, pretty pleased. This is impressive that anti-gravity was able to go through a fairly complex code lab, multiple tabs, doing a deployment to Cloud Run, setting up an MCP server, really quite a complex set of steps to successfully navigate those steps and to get to the desired outcome.